Thank you so much to all of you for welcoming me here this evening. I feel a significant weight of responsibility under Natalia's excitement and personal nervousness. But no, in all seriousness, it's such a great delight to be here tonight, and it's a sign of my seriousness that there are actually slides, because I tend to be a walk and talk kind of a person, not talk to slides, but I do have a few for you here this evening. So I think this is a really important place to start. So obviously SuperFierce, for me, when I was beginning SuperFierce, it actually started off as a business called Beat the Fees. It was very male, very competitive, and then it transitioned to Your Superhero, which felt very much like someone was swooping in to save you and all of those things. But ultimately, we ended up becoming a business called SuperFierce, and that's because we actually want to stand for something that's all about how women will feel, act and behave when they lean in to take control of the decisions they make that will empower their fierce, financial, female future. And I think everyone in this room shares an aspiration that together we can empower women and the communities in which they live and thrive, the families at which they sit at the heart of, and therefore the economies that we support in the growth to prospering when we create a fearless female future. And together we can bring that future so much closer to today. So in this room are some people I must thank immediately. Actually, there's lots, but I'm just going to go with one tonight. So Moira, just an extraordinary inspiration to everyone here. I'm so deeply grateful at the extraordinary warmth and welcome that you've extended to me, which, it's a funny moment for someone like me to be here, because even though I look tall, and I am tall, but even though I look tall and put together and like a grown-up, at heart, I still feel very much like an 8-year-old that was growing up as a weird and wacky kid in a very, very small country town in South Australia. And I've grown and flown far from there, but at my heart, this is absolutely where I belong. And it's such a tremendous thrill and a privilege to be here. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And the photograph you saw of us before was when I arrived into, when was that? Must have been this year. Anyway, arrived into South Australia, and, that was really an area that was very special to me and my family down around Carrickalinga and Silver Sands. And, and I sat with Moira and I asked her permission, her welcome back into this community, and gave her my promise that I wasn't going to come in like I knew everything and demand attention, but, was very grateful for the willingness of Moira to welcome us. So thank you. So a fierce financial future. Let's see if I can work the computer. There we go. So first things first. The start of this story is pretty grim. And Natalia's already given you a little bit of a spoiler to that. It's going to get a bit worse, but I promise, just like our warm, heart-filled friend here, it is actually going to be all right. And the evidence of that is in the room here this evening. So that's me. Thanks to Lisa, who coined the phrase confetti-loving feminist. That's me. So you've had a touch of colour on who I am as a professional and where I've come from. But a part of that journey for me, which has brought us here today, it's come as a great surprise to me, the very strange things that happen through life, and you would never design them. But I feel like they've all happened for a very particular reason, which is to bring me here today. And that is that I'm a pretty cerebral person, very strategic. My expertise is financial engineering and structuring products and services, but I have a strange knack for understanding humans and translating the complexity of data and finance to link it to things that matter to real humans. Came as a great surprise to me. Certainly wasn't expected. I was much better at singing and falling out of trees and playing golf, but somehow I ended up there. And on my journey, I think I was constantly surprised at the ability that I had to make an impact on people's lives and to connect with them. But importantly, there was a punctuation mark in my personal journey, which Natalia has referenced, which at the age of 34, and I'm careful about how I share this story because it's not just my story, so there is more colour to the story. But at the age of 34, I looked much like this, just a few less wrinkles, a few less pounds. But I looked much like this, and everybody looked at me and they thought that I had everything. I was travelling the world first class. I lived in a harbourside mansion. I was coiffed. I was together. I was never crying or cowering where they could see me. But at the age of 34, I had to borrow $3,000 from my parents to leave a harbourside mansion and start my life again with a 2-year-old under my arm. And the importance of that story is people believe that doesn't happen to people like me. And it shouldn't. You know, I had the education. I had the knowledge. I had the understanding. I didn't have the close networks and connections and support that people probably thought that I did. And the people who were close to me truly just didn't believe what was actually happening in my life. This is the honest truth. Much to their shame today, but it's my fault as well because I was strong and I just kept going. The way I looked at it is I didn't have the option of not turning up every day and dealing with it, but it wasn't easy. And ultimately, I had to make a tremendously difficult decision and literally start my entire life again at the age of 34. Now, the good news story here is that I realized that I had something inside me that enabled me to step forward from that moment and just start again, one step forward, one step forward. My first job was hanging Christmas decorations for $10 a night. You know, $10 an hour, probably not a night, $10 an hour. But, you know, that taking those steps. But I had the ability to do that and then go and get a job. And, you know, my roles at Macquarie, just so you know, were after this period in my life. And like most women, I had zero confidence. I didn't think I could get a job. I had no idea how to go about getting a job at that point. You know, my confidence was shattered, my connections were lost, and I felt tremendously isolated and alone. But that's not the key part of the story. The key part of the story is where we are today with the SuperFierce story, because I was absolutely determined that other women wouldn't experience what I have experienced, but more particularly the women who don't have the same luxuries and privileges and capacity and opportunities that someone like me has, that we would step into that breach and help those women through Fierce Impact and supporting people like Sarah, and also making sure that young women and all of the women around us today don't have to do that. So that leads us here. That's a little bit about me. So I'm really sorry to tell you that right now we have a $30 trillion global gender wealth gap. $30 trillion. Now, I don't know about you, but I kind of feel like we work really hard. That doesn't feel fair to me. I don't know what happens at your house. So now another number that a lot of people don't realise is that in Australia, on average, a man $2 million more than a woman over his lifetime. $2 million more. We have a 47% retirement gap, and there are a lot of reasons that contribute to that, some of which Natalia touched on. But if you look at that $2 million gap in earnings, that's the starting point. And the gender pay gap is a part of that. There are so many more aspects. Now, this one is very close to my heart. So over the last 10 years, of all of the new small businesses that were established in this country, 60% of those were established by women. Awesome, right? The next stat I'm going to give you is certain to be wrong, but let's just roll with it. You can check it later. or I'll check it later for you. But those small businesses are contributing to 55% of the wage growth, typically, right? And so if you think about the importance of that contribution to our economy, to other people's jobs, to their economic security, 60% of that's coming from businesses founded by women. It's amazing, right? How awesome is that? However, of all of the business loans, only 30% of those go to small businesses, but even worse, only 15% of those loans go to women-founded small businesses. See the layers, right? That $2 million, the 47%, it's comprised of all of these different layers of unconscious bias, conscious bias, that mean that women don't access the same levers of wealth and economic security. These are things we can solve. So don't get too despairing. We're going to get on to some good news soon. And close to my heart, I'm raising capital for my business at the moment. Depends whose numbers you look at. I went on the generous side. Of all of the venture capital that's distributed around the world, a measly 2% go to female-founded businesses, despite the fact that we build incredibly sustainable, profitable businesses. It's insane. It's insane. So that's bad news. That sucks. So that's the bad news. It's not good, but the good news is women are awesome. Like, we're awesome. Like, we really are. We're awesome. SheEO is the perfect example of that. Hen House is the perfect example of that. So we're impact focused. There's extraordinary studies that show the power of women who are choosing where they invest their money, where they spend their money. And it's all driven by a focus on investing where they can drive strong social impact outcomes. And that's because we're generous. We care about more than ourselves. We understand the ripple effect. We are givers, we are carers, but we're also incredibly strong and resilient. Anyone who has met a woman at the heart of a family, and you don't have to have had children to be at the heart of a family, every woman sits at the heart of a family somewhere, understands that incredible formula which combines generosity and resilience. We're also natural money managers. Who manages the finances in your house, right? You know how much lunch money is going to be. You work out how much we actually are good at this stuff. But girls are told that they are not. We're told that we're not good at it at school. We get the sense that we're not good at math. And I'd love to tell you it's changing. I suspect maybe it is, but I happen to have 4 kids, only 2 from the fruit of my loins, but still adds up to 4. And I see the messages that they're getting, and it's not changing fast enough. We're actually also awesome investors. So more on that later. And you would see that all the time. Actually, no, I'm going to touch on it now, because something I'm really passionate about is women think that, actually not just women, people think investing is tricky. They think it's complicated. Because in financial services, we're really fantastic at making things sound complicated, because then we can get paid more to do it for you. The reality is, the reason why women are great investors is because we're good at research, but we've also got great gut instincts, like really good intuition. Investing is intuitive. If you think it's going to solve a problem that you care about, if it's a product that you would buy for yourself or for somebody else, there's a good chance it's got something in there. So trust your instinct. And here's some awesome news. Women's power is actually already growing, whether you know it or not. Our wealth is growing 2.3% faster per annum than men globally. So we're making up pace. It's going to take time, but this is a part of the solution. So that's some good news. And here's some more good news. So normally UBS Wealth Management is not the warmest, smoochiest mob around. So there's some significant research and analysis that sits behind this. But this is where UBS Wealth is actually, I mean, it's self-serving. They're trying to work out how they're going to appeal to women, right? How are we going to do this? But it's interesting. So we know this. Women don't want to just boost the bottom line. They also want to help the communities that we live in. And we want to do that by investing in education, health, care, aged care, health, and our planet. And we see that. And what I love seeing is the growing trend to that with the young people, not just women, actually, and seeing that convergence with the sexes more broadly. So that's great. And isn't she gorgeous? She makes me feel happy looking at her too. So back to a little bit of bad news. So Melinda Gates, the data is unequivocal. No matter where in the world you're born, your life will be harder if you're a girl. And she didn't just say that. The Gates Foundation has invested a significant amount of time and money into reaching that understanding. So clearly there's a $30 trillion gender wealth gap that must be closed. The problem is, and just jumping ahead to why I'm doing what I'm doing, at the moment traditional financial services ignores 50% of the world's population, us. And we know that the implications are dire. The flow-on impacts of homelessness, DV, all of these things, economic security. But from my side, as a fiercely commercial person with a heart, it's just stupid. It's just bad business. Yeah, it's a bunch of men who haven't worked out, they haven't read the tea leaves on where we're going. So this is an opportunity for all of us to change the story, to lean into the opportunity. We've got growing wealth, growing education, growing understanding, women choosing different lifestyles as well. Selfishly, we're focused first for SuperFierce on the retirement savings gap. Why? Because it is one of the largest assets for most women, but it's also something we can smash apart hard and fast. The gender pay gap annoys the shit out of me, but that's incremental change. I'm not really designed for incremental change. I'm kind of a jump in and smash it apart kind of person. So we're starting with closing the gap at retirement because there are some really simple, fast things that we can do, which I'll take you through afterwards. So I'm going to skip past that, blah, blah. It's actually out of my investment deck, so forgive me for throwing that one in. So that's just painting a little bit of a picture about where we are. What we need to do as women, individually, together, and for our girls and societally as well, is to arm them and all of our kids, right? I love men. I love my boys, got 3. But women in particular need a special encouragement around this, which is to understand that powering up a really fierce financial future for yourself and for others doesn't actually have to be as hard as people think it is. And I don't know what you see, Natalia, but I know even for myself, right? I've worked in financial services for close to 30 years. And yeah, I have times where I'm just like, I feel like I don't know, or it's overwhelming, it's confusing. And, I'll default to my husband who's gorgeous and really, really great at algorithms because it just feels easier. But we're like, are you kidding me? You can do this, right? And so it's giving ourselves that muscle memory of going, yeah, we can, and showing our girls that they can as well. So towards the end of this presentation, I'm going to show you the heart of the SuperFierce business model, which sits inside the relationship with Hen House as well. And not for a self-serving reason, but to show you that there are very simple things that we can do as we build social enterprises, as we make decisions as consumers and investors, to really link our own outcomes with systemic change, but also just direct financial impact that's good for others. And that's what women are great at, seeing that flow-on impact. It's going to get surprising to me from here where we went with the slides. So let's just see. So I'm actually not going to spend too long on these next 2 slides because they actually look at the broader journey to creating wealth, independent wealth. I typically don't use the word financial independence when I talk to women, and I argue with the guys in my team all the time. I'm like, yeah, you say financially independent to women, they go, oh, financial, money, don't know, numbers, not interested. Independent, what do you mean? I like hanging out with my family and my friends. It's not about that. It's actually about choice. I couldn't care less about money. I find money mindlessly boring, except that it's a weapon for choice. It's a weapon for security. It's a weapon for being able to decide how you're going to live your life, where, when, and if you need to leave, you can. Or you can choose to stay. It's all about choice. So the short-term actions, get earning. Making sure that women understand that you do need to be earning your own income in some way where you can. And, it's kind of controversial to say that because we're carers. We're the primary carers in families for youth and for the elderly, but we give up a huge amount of power. So let's forget, once we've got to that point, let's look at our young women. Let's make sure our young women understand the power of earning and owning their own money, that they know how to ask for the pay rise or demand the pay rise, demonstrate why they deserve the pay rise, that they know how to spend wisely. Now that's got so many layers, right? That's about being conscious. Everybody hates the word budget, so have a plan. Know what matters to you. Why are you going to spend where, how, when? And how are you going to make sure that you've got more coming in than you've got going out. But spending wisely also means being conscious about where you spend it. We control the majority of the consumer decisions in our households. Support locally made. Support female-owned businesses. Educate yourself. Check what's on the label. Choose, because we have the ability through these little ripples to make a really significant difference to the economic security of other women, but also the growing tide of how we think, behave, invest and live in this country and beyond our own shores. Start saving. Like everybody says it, but really start, and we all feel it. It's like, oh, did I really need to get that extra dress this week? Or maybe it could, we all have these moments, right? But for our young people, get earning, spend wisely. Start saving, use protection. Because it's boring, right? You're spending, and it's kind of negative, right? You're investing your hard-earned cash into something terrible that may happen one day that you don't want to think about. It's almost as bad as super. So, but it's just so tremendously important. And using protection is insurance, but it's more than that as well. It's making sure that if you are in a relationship with somebody else, man or woman or something in between, it doesn't matter, that you're protected, that there's some type of contract so that if things don't work out, and they often don't, that you are protected. If you're of a certain age, and you can jump in at any point here, but, power of attorney, make sure you've got a will. For me, a will's important in my life because I just really want to make sure nobody comes to my funeral wearing black. Just so you know, there's no black. And there'll be lots of flowers, champagne, and wild dancing. But you know what I mean. Sorry? Yes. So, but it's very important. Okay, so that's short term. I spent more time on that than I meant to. Long term. So the other stuff's the stuff you must always be doing, quick. You've always got to be thinking about it, but they're the things you can do immediately, quickly and easily, and there are very significant things that you can do, which we won't cover tonight. But this is where it starts to become a real game changer. So looking at retirement income, what are the ways that you can make sure that you're going to have cash flow once you stop earning? And that's not just super. There are other ways to do that as well. Property. One of the next products that we will be releasing will be in the property space, because the access to home ownership and investment ownership for women is incredibly, the numbers are terrible actually compared with men, and it's such an important lever of wealth. And again, talking about how all these little Lego blocks of unconscious bias and disadvantage turn into a big wall that you can't get over. If you don't have those savings, if you don't have the investments, if you don't have the property in your own name, those sorts of things, when you have your own business, then you can't get a small business loan, et cetera, they just all add up. They're all tiny things, but together they create something really quite significant and meaningful. Business, right? You know, a lot of the people in this room want 60% of small businesses started by women. Why? Okay, well, I've got to look after mum and dad and I've got to look after my kids, and so I'm going to set up a business so that I can have flexibility and so on. That's where it starts from. But it is also such a significant opportunity for women to build their own personal confidence, resilience and wealth, but also to change the fabric of society by making sure that the right sorts of businesses are growing and investing. So many different types of investing. And that's an important part of that as well. Not going anywhere near it tonight. So that's a light touch on these, but tonight, superannuation, for the very first time in the history of man, is the star of the show. So what that says behind the box is, do you think that super is more snoozy than sexy? I said think again. The honest truth is I think it is too. And it came as a great shock to me to care about super. But I did when I realised how incredibly powerful it is. You know, I think now about the power of it in the growing stages, but when I started to care about super, it was in the context of smashing apart that gender wealth gap. And that's because, based on our analysis, we're pretty good at data. The average Australian woman can save $105,000 in unnecessary super fees over her lifetime by consolidating into a lower cost super fund. So $105,000 is significant when you're retiring. It's a significant impact. What we also see in the people that we engage with is when they make a change and they see how much they're going to save, something else unexpected but wonderful happened. They actually started to pay attention to their super and leaned in and taking positive steps. I should have known that would be the case, but it didn't cross my mind, in all honesty. And it's one of the most exciting things, along with the fact that we can all enjoy more margaritas on the beach if we do that together. Pina coladas, whatever you prefer. So when it comes to super, because I'm not going to bang on about this too much tonight, to be honest, and in a minute I'm going to show you where you're going to be able to go and get more information. But we've put together a very detailed document for you all, which you can download, which has got a lot of information about super. The things and it's shiny, it's colourful. We use normal language, doesn't feel like a financial services document, but it's got a lot of the detail around all of these things that you need to think about, which I'm going to touch on here. It's a very boring talk to talk about super in detail, so we won't do that tonight. We can if you want to another time, but I'm going to go through what are the key things to be thinking about, and then you can go into that document to get more detail on that. So the very first thing is that I think people just don't understand. So actually, it's not even on here. The first thing is people don't seem to think about super as their money. And it's quite extraordinary, right? If I went into my bank account and I'd got my monthly pay in and 10% of it was missing, I'd just be like, where the fuck's my money? Right? And yet that's what happens every month. But because we don't think of it as our money, we don't check to see where it's gone or pay attention to how it's been used. But it's like, that's a lot of your money. And as Natalia said, for a lot of Australians, their superannuation is their largest financial asset. Controversially, I think it probably comes after the one that we ignore the most, which is ourselves. You're your number one financial asset. So invest in yourself, take care of yourself, prioritise yourself, make sure you're growing yourself. Whole other seminar, but I don't believe in seminars, chats. But it's your money, so pay attention to it. Make sure you know where it's going. Make sure you're getting paid. The number of people who've worked for small businesses and then realise they've never been paid their super and they're never going to get it back. It's tremendously damaging to your financial future. Consolidation, such a boring word. So, but it's actually very powerful. So how many of you have more than one smartphone?
Oh, no.
Got one? Okay. How many of you have more than one phone plan for your smartphone? Right. That's what it's like to have more than one super fund in most situations. It's like having one phone and paying for a plan with Vodafone, Optus and Telstra. Unless you live in the back of Burke, like then it might make sense, but it doesn't make sense. All it means is you're paying 2, 3, 4 times, 5 times. I've seen people with 8 super funds. It means you're paying for fees for 0 additional benefit. And that will completely erase your superannuation balance. So at the very least, make sure you have one super fund. If you have more than one super fund, make sure you've got a really good reason for that. Occasionally there is a good reason. So as an example, if you have your insurance through a super fund, a lot of Australians don't realise that you can, and you do, and you're paying for it. That's another way you can be paying additional fees. But make sure that you only have an extra super fund for a good reason. For example, you might have insurance that gives you, if you've got existing medical conditions or something, gives you access to insurance. That's a starting point.
Sorry, what sort of insurance?
It's life insurance. No, it's life insurance. So until recently in your superannuation, you would be automatically opted into the insurance that was included in the super. More recently, it was legislated that you had to opt into it. But yeah, so you just need to take a look at that. A lot of people don't realise. I'm just going to jump ahead to insurance because we've touched on it now. But the other thing with insurance is that insurance is complicated, genuinely complicated. It's also absolutely personal. So you really do need to make sure you get good professional advice and support when you're looking at your insurance. And women are horribly underinsured. So that's something to really look at. I'm sure Natalia can give you some great tips on who to talk to. So I'm going to skip those because they're the most controversial ones. Should have done these in a different order. So tax, not talking about tax. Tax is boring, but there are tax implications, particularly depending on if you're have your own business or so. You need legal advice. You need professional advice on that. Let's forget tax. Boring. Important but boring. Investments will be something that the people in the room will be very interested in. So there are all sorts of different types of superannuation funds, and there are all sorts of different types of investment categories within those different types of superannuation funds. Today, we see that there is a really significant interest in ethical and sustainable and social filters. So, for instance, we see the rise of funds that are marketed on really focusing on what's good for women, which is wonderful. But so you really want to make sure that if you're making decisions on that, that you're really getting under the bonnet to have a look at that and seeing if they really live up to the promise of why you're investing there. It's quite complicated, so I'm not going to go into it in too much detail tonight, but we have put together a one-pager on things that you can think about when you're wanting to see if your money is invested in the way that you think makes sense for you with an ethical, sustainable, social filter. I'm actually really excited about the changes that I see going on in the industry. And once again, I never expected to say that about superannuation, but I see that there's a real genuine shift and a move amongst the funds, and the cynical people might say it's because they know they need to, but that's fine, to really start to take that seriously. But it is easy to make decisions that are based just on marketing rather than reality. So we will share that afterwards, and Kimberly at the back of the room will remind me to send that to you, Natalia, to send around. So that's important, but it's exciting, right? It's important to know that you can actually control that. It's also important to know that you can actually do that within a whole range of different investment funds as well. Sorry, super funds. It's also important to know that you can get trapped from time to time to think that you're investing into something that you wanted to, and it's not quite. So I'm going to use an example that will remain nameless because it'll be rude, but there's a particular fund that is a really good fund, a good low-cost fund that we do recommend and we think is a good fund. And there's some really high-profile people who promote it widely as well. But if you go to the website of that fund, most people will end up in a completely different investment category, which means they're going to have completely different outcomes. So, you know, we've seen people losing hundreds of thousands of dollars because they think they've gone into the fund that they were recommended, but because they don't know how to find that investment category, they end up in the wrong fund. So that's something to look out for as well. I don't mean to sound mean and grumpy, but it's important, right? So it's actually not complex. You just have to take the time. Don't assume that you're being directed where you should be. They're commercial entities. This company has this great fund, but they don't make much money out of that one. So they push you to that one first. Performance and fees. So at SuperFierce, we have a house philosophy that the majority of Australians are better off in a low-cost super fund. And there's a reason for that. And by the way, ASIC agrees with us, Grattan Institute agrees with us, just not typically financial services and the media. So the reason why we believe that is that the only thing that is persistent in investments, any type of investment or superannuation, is fees. What that means is that's the only thing you can count on. It's detailed in the PDS. Now, it's not actually that easy to unravel the fees in a product disclosure statement, but it is published. And if they make a change, they are required legally to let you know about that. Performance, we're a country of gamblers. Like, let's face it, in Melbourne, you get a public holiday not just for the grand final, but to get ready for it the day before. Crazy. But we love to gamble. And you look at the way we talk about superannuation in the media and in the industry, and everybody, oh, you know, how's your fund performing? We are focused on performance all the time. It kind of makes sense until you get under the bonnet of that. Now, in financial services, and I've had to write more product disclosure statements than I care to remember, like shaking this in the corner, you know, they're very detailed, complicated, horrible legal documents. Every single one in financial services, we are required to say past performance is not necessarily indicative of future performance. And there's a really good reason for that. It's not. So the Grattan Institute says fees are persistent, performance is transient. The other layer to that, so many layers, is that superannuation is a long-term investment. What that means is you're not trying to shoot the lights out today and next year and 3 years. You're looking to smooth out volatility, you know, the bumps of the market. That's how it works. It's all over the shop. Managers will tell you they can control it. They can't, right? Warren Buffett, the godfather of investing, puts his wife's money in index balance funds because he knows that you can't. So it's a long-term investment horizon. Most people will have that investment in some form for around 50 years. So what you want to do is you want to deliver the most consistent, smooth returns that you can over the long term. So if a fund is pointing to their performance over the last 1, 2, 3 years, you go, well, you know, nice try, see how you keep going. You know, that doesn't tell me anything. If you choose, our analysis shows, if you choose one of the best performers this year, got an 80% chance you'll be on the bottom of the ladder next year. But don't worry about that because you're not doing that. You're looking for the long term. So the government recently released the Your Super analysis, which is a great start, except it misses a bunch of stuff. That's a conversation for another day. But for some reason, they've created a new category, which is a 6-year performance period, which nobody's ever heard of before. But anyway, that's fine. But it's still not enough. It's not enough, right? 6 years doesn't tell you anything. So we've done analysis which looks at the most consistent low fee fund performance. So the funds that have the lowest fees but deliver consistent returns over the last 10 to 15 years. So we're starting to get some sort of an indication. And here's the beautiful little nugget there to give you some comfort and confidence. High fee funds perform worse. Low fee funds tend to perform better. Now, house view, not everybody agrees, but our house view is that active management, which is why you pay more fees, you know, that's people meddling with things and they can't. They think they can outsmart the markets and, you know, maybe I haven't seen it happen yet. So focus on fees first, then look at consistent performance over time. Get that balance together. Am I banging on too long? Oh.
No.
So,
This is the meat and potatoes, Trenna.
it absolutely is. And so contributions is also vital. And just so you know, right, so, you know, the punctuation mark on tonight is we've done all the work for you, don't worry. So, not quite true, but contributions is a really vital part of this as well. So when you're earning, when you're working for somebody else, your employer is contributing super on your behalf. Make sure they are, make sure it's the right amount, make sure that you choose your own fund, that you don't just believe it when they tell you that you have to be in the fund that they're in. Make sure your kids, if they get new jobs, that when they get a new job, that they roll their money into just one fund. Lots of simple things that you can do. But contributions is like one of the most powerful tools in the toolkit. So there are all sorts of different types of contributions, and we expand on those elsewhere for you. It is something to look at carefully because it's different based on your personal situation, but you can make personal contributions. You can make personal contributions before tax, post-tax, different numbers, lots of different implications of that. But if you can contribute anything, you should. And it makes really significant impacts. So further to a specific request from Natalia, in the super book that we've put together for you, there's an illustration which shows what Super Sally does versus Lazy Larry. And Super Sally demonstrates the power of investing a small amount into your super versus Lazy Larry, who actually wasn't lazy. He was investing it into a savings account, but showing the implications of compounding, you know, and compounding's like, you know, my husband comes out with all these insane metaphors to explain compound interest, which I'm pretty sure nobody understands. But essentially, you know, it's just a piece of pure magic that does its work on its own for you. The more you do today, it builds on itself and builds and builds and builds. So the earlier you start, the better you are off over time. So contributions, the more you do earlier, the more you tell the young people in your life, the small things they do today, they've got so long for that to grow. Like, I find that incredibly exciting. Tiny, tiny things. I'll show you an example of that in a moment. So they're really the massive parts of super. I mean, there's all sorts of complexity, but they're the key things to be thinking about. But the most important thing is to remember it's your money, to pay attention to it, to make sure you're not paying too much for it, and to make sure it's invested where you're comfortable with that. And it's a balancing act, right? It's your money, it's your values, right? So if you're willing to pay more for it to be invested somewhere that it's doing something good for you, because a strong tip, you know, if you want to invest into ethical, sustainable, you are going to pay more for it. At the moment. They're working on it, but at the moment, you know, and that's okay. our experience in our business is that young people are willing to pay more and save less to invest into saving the world. And that makes me pretty excited about how awesome the future is with these young people in charge. Won't tell you about what the older people do. They don't have as much time left. So this is just a little example, not the sort of example you were talking about, but this is another one that talks to my thesis about fees and performance and contributions. So if you wanted an extra $50,000 in retirement, and to make that more meaningful for you, it works for me. So there are some people in this room who I would love to schedule a long ladies' lunch every Friday of my retirement with. So an extra $50,000 would mean that I'd have an extra $80 a week to spend. So, you know, if you can do that, you know, we can all have a really significantly awesome long lunch every week of our retirement. That's us. So here are 3 different ways that you can do that. All very similar, different outcomes. Same outcomes. So the easiest one is fees. If you were to pay 0.5% per annum less in fees, you're going to get that result. A strong tip, that's not very hard to achieve out there based on what we see. So that's very, very easy. Performance, harder, but you can get the same outcome if you were to earn that much more per annum. Let's do both. We're having really great lunches. And we've done that hard work for you to narrow that field. So it's easier for you to do that, to get low fees and better performance, consistent performance over the long term. And contributions, just $18 more per week. Like, I've been out to lunch here this week. I'm actually quite shocked how much a sandwich and a coffee costs in LA nowadays. You know, that's just $18 a week that gives you that outcome in retirement. And it's just being conscious about that, not just not having the 2 coffees and the sandwich, but making sure it goes into your super as well. And there are lots of other ways that you can do that. So this is a little introduction to SuperFierce, and this is a really bad slide for which I apologise sincerely. You don't need to read it, but on the right-hand side there is just an introduction to the experience that you have with SuperFierce. So SuperFierce is a fintech, it's a digital product platform, and we've done the hard work for you. You plug in a little bit of information. At a minimum for your report, more than 2,500 calculations are run instantaneously to develop a fully customised digital statement of advice. And a statement of advice is a legal document, which typically, financial advisors would charge you about $3,500 for on average. And we do that for you free. So in that report, you'll see how much you have in super today, how much it's costing you, how much you're on track to retire with, and how much you could save in fees if you were to switch into a lower cost super fund in a range of different investment categories. There's a lot of detail in there. We've worked really hard to make it easy to understand and beautiful, and we're working on making it better. And in the next stages of development, you'll be able to model the impact of contributions, the impact of time out of the workforce for anyone who's got daughters, you know, who are thinking about having babies or they've had babies and now they're in a position where they're going, yeah, I'd like to get back to work, but it's going to cost, I'm only going to get an extra $50 a week after childcare, so I'm not going to go back to work. Please tell them to go back to work, because they miss out on super. They miss out on career progression. They miss out on skills gap, or they get the skills gap because they're missing out on that growing piece. Now, it doesn't mean women shouldn't spend time with their children. We should have the choice, but they need to be armed with the knowledge of the impact of those decisions. These are the things that contribute to that $2 million, to the 47% gap. Young women do not think about this. And for your young, I've gone AWOL here, but really passionate about this. The things that your daughters do between the ages of 18 and 30, they eradicate the impact of the gender pay gap. If they just contribute to their super through that period, they can take that time off to be a full-time mum if they want. But if they don't, they are going to pay the penalty with that average gap in earnings over their lifetime of $2 million. Other things that they can do. I have some fairly robust conversations about this one, but partners can now choose to contribute to their partner's super when they're not working. Frankly, legislate that shit. 2 people have a baby, split the super, or actually give it all to the person who's giving up their career, and let's put a bonus on top, but that's for another day. But at a minimum, make sure they know and make sure that they're doing it. Now, this is the problem, but if it's not legislated, sorry, I won't get on my soapbox for a moment. If it's not legislated, women are not having that conversation. This is a difficult conversation to have, and they are not in the power position to have that conversation. So as mothers, advocates, we must do whatever we can to drive those changes in the system and in policy. But for now, let's do it for the women around us. Let's do that for the women in our workforces. Let's make sure employment in the HR departments that they're looking at those things. So you can do it at that point, but the more you can get them to contribute to their super earlier on, the better off they're going to be. Sorry, went AWOL, getting wound up in the end. So a little bit more about us. So SuperFierce is built specific, we are for women. We're unapologetically about that. We're for everyone, but we're female first. So 22% of our customers at the moment are men, but typically it's because their wives or girlfriends or sisters have made them do it. But we're okay with that because Moira loves disrupting the patriarchy, and I love the gentle waves of quiet redistribution of wealth that men don't notice are happening. And I'll explain that one to you in a moment. So we're independent and unbiased. So we're privately owned. It's purely quantitative. We're not paid by funds or product pushers. We don't earn commission. You can trust that the information we provide you is completely unbiased and in your best interest as far as we can, based because it's quantitative. We can't take into account your personal situation. We actually have an AFSL, so that's where we're different as well. So we actually have advice baked into your SOA, which is a legal document. And importantly, that report's free. Now, every man I talk to, and we're raising capital at the moment, they're all like, oh my God, you really need to give it away free. From a commercial perspective, excellent question. But that's the beauty of being a social enterprise where purpose is baked into the heart of everything that we do. There is literally no way that I could run this business and feel okay about only providing these insights and clarity and understanding to people who can afford to pay for it, because the people who can afford to pay for it are not most women. So our ultimate goal is to provide appropriate, affordable advice to every single woman in this country, regardless of her geography or her financial or societal position. So that's very important. And that then leads into what I call Robin Hood pricing. Apparently I need to change the name of that because anyone who's younger than me doesn't know who Robin Hood is. But essentially, same premise again. So for our service, the way that we make money is if somebody wants to make a change to their super, we manage that process for them for a price, because otherwise we'll have no business and we'll fail and my children will starve and I won't be able to fund initiatives for people like Sarah. But so the way that the pricing works is it's based on your personal situation. So how much you have in funds, so funds under management, for someone of your age and gender, based on what the government thinks you should have. If you're less than that, we discount all the way down to zero. And that fee can be taken from your super savings if you prefer, or pay by credit card. So we've worked really hard to smooth out any of the friction points so that anybody and everybody can afford to access and use this service, because we think it's tremendously important. And every time someone uses our service. So SuperFierce is comprised of two entities. Fierce Impact is the philanthropic side of our business. So every time somebody pays to use our service, we donate $100 to help Australian women in need. And it's a source of great delight and a real privilege for me that having met Sarah at the first ever CEO Summit, that, I've been on the journey together for quite some years now, to be in a position where we're able to support the GoGo Foundation, not just with funds, but also wanting to bring our expertise and understanding around how you build self-sustaining, scalable enterprises. And it's nice to hang out with colourful, warm, beautiful people like Sarah. So this just gives you a little look inside our business. I wasn't going to put this in here, and I've got the one you want on the next slide. I popped it in because of this audience. My bra's falling off. I popped it in because of this audience where we're actually talking about divestment and about revolutionary business models and a different approach to the creation and redistribution of wealth, investing into structures that matter to us. So my background is really quite diverse, but at its heart, it's a structuring, financial engineering and structuring mind. So for me, this makes perfect sense. Don't understand why everybody doesn't do it this way. So this is our life-changing formula, and it's really simple math that we've used here. So this is our ecosystem. There's two companies. There's SuperFierce, which is the commercial entity, and Fierce Impact, which is a PTY Ltd still, but it's philanthropic drive. It's set up that way at the moment because it just gives us more, more options in terms of how we use those funds to drive different initiatives, which I'll talk to you about later, Maura, because I got ideas. So on this side, so SuperFierce is profit for purpose. At the moment, it's we're helping women to save on their super, and the average fee savings per customer over their lifetime is $100,000. So if we can get 1 million women to make that change, that's not actually, yeah, here we go. That's $100 billion back into the funds of women to fund a safer, self-directed retirement. Because we donate $100, these numbers don't actually add up, don't mind me, but that would be $100 million to fund initiatives like Sarah. So it's just 1 million women. If it's men, Bob's your bloody uncle. That's $100 that goes to help a woman in need every time. That's a really gentle but powerful redistribution of wealth. And this is just the articulation of our model, and we wanted to be really upfront about how this works in the relationship between SuperFierce and Hen House, which I don't say, sorry. Is it Hen's House or Hen? I thought so, thank you. We're just having an argument about that area. So, pardon me. So the way that it works, it's the same relationship, it's the same model, but this shows the power of that relationship. So same numbers, but so if 100 members of ReNest, because you're going to grow rapidly, I know, were to make that change, that's immediately $10,000 that comes back in that can be used however you want to invest into other businesses or whatever you want to do with that. But it's also $10 million back into the funds of the women in your network. See that flow-on impact into your community? But it's also that hidden ripple effect where women then lean in and they feel like they can do more and they ask the next question, which is, by the way, I was firmly determined that we were only going to do super. I have ADHD, so I have to focus at the beginning. But I very quickly realised that we would build this out to a full personal wealth platform because we need to help women with every single one of those levers of wealth, but doing it using scalable advice. And that's an extra $10,000 to help how many women?
And got about 150 is what we're looking on at the moment.
And that's just if 100 women make that change. So that's really at the heart of our relationship. So there's now a shiny digital environment where the members of Hen House can go and the people in your community feel free to share that. I'm assuming I can say that. I think the more the merrier. So that when you go there, there's a lot more to it than that. But when you go there, you're going to get some information. You can download your free super savings report. It is like about 23 pages, but lots of those pages have only got photos on them, just letting you know. But we think there's a lot of useful information in there. And if you've got questions, we're there to answer those as well. But it's also where you can request your free super savings report. As a strong tip, it looks like you're chatting with someone on Facebook Messenger. So look for that box in the middle, and it's very simple to do. And again, if you have any questions, let us know. We're here to help. Kimberly, who's at the back of the room hiding because she's shyer than I am. Kimberly's our COO, and she is building and running our customer service and operations pillar of our business here in Adelaide. So she is here all the time, except when I lure her out of the state, and really pretty much the friendliest, nicest person you'll ever meet. But also has worked in superannuation for the last several decades. She's a CPA and a registered tax agent, and there's pretty much nothing she doesn't know about this space, but if she doesn't know, she'll find out for you. She's quite extraordinary. And that's really where we get to, because otherwise I could talk about this stuff all night, but you will want to drink and go home. I wouldn't mind a drink too. But to end, like, the most important thing for me is that these are the most extraordinary, exciting things that are happening. And I don't know if you feel the way that I do, but I see a rising tide and a shift in energy. You know, revolutions start with women burning their bras and, you know, having a while ago. I can't do that anymore, sadly. But there comes a point when the general populace starts to join the revolutionaries. And that's when things truly start to change. And I really believe that we're starting to see the cusp of that. And great thanks to leaders like Moira, who've had the courage to turn up to conversations and answer the question, what do you do? I disrupt the patriarchy. Those people, and, you know, as I've said to Moira, you know, we're so grateful. We really do stand on the shoulders of giants with the work that we do. But importantly, you know, I'm so excited to see so many of these types of environments starting to grow and evolve, the courage of these incredible women. And I know that not just together, not just us, but the amazing young people that we're bringing up and growing to be conscious and caring and to challenge the norm, that together we are changing the world, and we will change the world to be better for everybody. And I'm here to answer any of your questions.
Thank you so much. That was really insightful. Sadly, not much of it was new in terms of the facts and where we're at, but I think that you've created a sense of hope, from my perspective anyway, that there's actual little things that we can all do that actually can make huge difference and change. And especially when we trick men doing that, and then they kind of slowly, you know, you don't even know that, do you? But you're actually supporting them. So it's really good. So thank you so much. And Kimberly, thank you so much for all your help on this. And really, really appreciate it. We'll, of course, send you all a follow-up email with the link and all the information, all the bits and pieces and whatnot. So, and a survey. I would love your feedback in terms of what you liked, what you didn't. I have some ideas in terms of what I'd like to address in the follow-up events, but I very much want you to shape this, you know, and make it a journey rather than, you know, coming and just listening to whatever, you know, comes to my head, which can be very random sometimes. So thank you all, and I'd like to pass it on to Moira now. Well, let's.
You've got 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'll talk. Thank you, Trenna. Sarah said to me, "Do not make a business." I'm going to go moving. That would be bad. That would shoot. If it wasn't. It's
here, and I have a lot of people that aren't here who are really supporting this initiative. The hen house does want to disrupt patriarchy, that's absolutely true, and as Trenna was quoting me, that was a conversation I've been invited into a venture capital boys club, or it was called something else, like dinner with Andre or something like that. When it came to my turn, and that'll be to, I'm disrupting this. And I was really over it. To me, and I said, I'm on board, I'm disrupting patriarchy. And it was like, what? And this, you know, little old lady right there. And I just love that surprise fact. So I think that's good. A couple of things. Firstly, this has come about, so hen house as a whole. And so we talked to our membership nearly a year ago now. We began this conversation about what is it that we could be doing to close the gender investment gap. And when we first thought about these things, we thought about a bit about redistribution and a bit about investment, you know, really strong investment. And then Morty, who's not here, our token male on the wall, and he doesn't mind me saying that about it, he really challenged us back about what about divesting, like getting rid of something else. And it brought out another conversation that we're having. And I do think there are two elements to this. And so in a way, when you do a calculation around superannuation, it's a divestment strategy, because you're shifting things from one thing to another. And my dream is that we divest from patriarchy. And there's no reason why we cannot. We have had massive campaigns that are incredibly successful here in Australia and globally around divesting from the tobacco industry. You know, billions of dollars. We've had the same thing with coal, which has been revolutionary. And this is the next wave, I think. And we, in our humble little part of the world, can be part of that international wave of change. And we're looking for people to do that with us. And so it's fantastic that it's in a commercial environment. You know, we don't want to be in this charitable world. This keeps women oppressed. It keeps us all oppressed. And so ReNest is the campaign. This is one of the elements of the campaign, the divestment club that Natalia has brought so beautifully together tonight. And there'll be other things. So we're looking for about 50 community connectors. Doesn't matter who you are, what stage of life you're at, men, women, it's irrelevant, or anything in between, anything at all, anyone at all, who are willing to do a 1 hour training session, and then once a month come together and tell us how they've been going with their conversations. And it can be, you know, how did you go talking to your daughter about that? How did you go talking to the HR department? Oh, what worked for you when you were at the university investment committee, wherever you are. So we're really looking for those people. So if any of those are new here today, or someone, I was talking to Nick actually, Nicole Palmer, who works with Sarah Gogo, and she said, oh, I think my mum would like to do that, but she'd be too nervous, she wouldn't know what to do. And she said, well, why don't you get her to come along? And she's going to be talking to people. So we really want to build, so it's kind of the difference. I was talking to Vicky Saunders, who's the kind of CEO last week, and I said to her, look, while I'm interested, while we all talk about monetizing some of these solutions, and a lot of the startups are about that, we have to shift from the concept of monetizing to mobilizing. And that's the work we're doing. So we're going to be mobilizing the conversations and changing the discourse. And that requires us to behave differently. So I'm going to finish with I could talk the whole night about business too, but I won't. I did prepare some of that, so I'm going to leave it at that. I don't know, do any of you know this book by Amanda Lovelace? So if you're all under 30, you probably would. Amanda Lovelace rewrites fairy tales. So this is the rewriting of the Cinderella story. And there's godmothers, fairy godmothers included with all sorts of interesting advice. Some of which I won't read. It's absolutely fabulous. And I'm just going to read two tiny little bits of it. So this book was actually given to me for my birthday, which is next week. By Jessica Gallagher, who is a member of the Hen House, And she will be the new Deputy Vice Chancellor at the University of Adelaide. Any day now she'll be here with us, which I'm very excited about. She gave me this for my birthday last year in this book. So here's a little piece of advice. And it really is about the winning element. That if we do this and that beautiful, lovely mathematical equations at the end shows that if we do our bit, we are all winning. All women are winning. And in fact, the whole planet is winning. So at the same time, you need to be willing to recognise your privilege. So if we actually do have super, we are part of that privilege. At the same time, you need to be willing to recognise your privilege. Be willing to lace your fingers together. Be willing to give a boost when you can. You don't win until we're all winning. And that's really important. And this is the last little piece I'll read. And it really resonates with the story that Trenna told about her own life. And I think it resonates with all of us. We all have had these stories to ourselves. And we have to value, like when Trenna said, the most precious asset we've got is invested in ourselves. We are our own future. And it's a hard lesson to learn, speaking from experience. But it is one that I continue to learn every day, but it's one we must instill in each other and recognise it in each other. So she says, and this is actually now Cinderella's talking to herself. I found that most from rags to riches stories have very little to do with things such as money or material objects, and everything to do with who's still standing by your side when you discover your own self-worth, because you're a fucking treasure. So thank you, everyone.